Chosen ones, God just gave you a serious instruction. Ignore this and you'll regret forever. Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when time itself seems to pause, when something within you becomes alert, attentive, almost uneasy, not because something is wrong, but because something significant is happening. Tonight is one of those moments. This is not a gathering by accident, and this message is not arriving at random. You did not click on this, find this, or hear this by coincidence. You are here because there is a word, an instruction, a truth that has been chasing you, and now it has caught up with you. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, the greatest shifts in human destiny did not begin with noise, crowds, or applause. They began with a single instruction given to a single individual, an instruction that sounded simple, even unreasonable, an instruction that demanded courage, trust, and obedience. And those who obeyed changed the course of their lives forever, while those who delayed were left to wonder what could have been. We live in a world that celebrates comfort, convenience, and consensus. We are taught to move only when we feel ready, to act only when we are certain, and to wait until every detail makes sense. But divine instruction does not work that way. When God speaks, He does not always explain, He does not negotiate, He does not debate, He instructs. And that instruction is often the dividing line between elevation and stagnation, between fulfillment and lifelong regret. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you listening right now are not confused. You are conflicted. You already know what you are supposed to do. You have felt it repeatedly, in quiet moments, in restless nights, in the gentle but persistent pressure on your spirit that refuses to go away. The issue has never been clarity. The issue has been courage. Because obeying God often requires letting go of what feels familiar, safe, and socially acceptable. This message is for the ones who have been warned before the storm, for the ones who sense that time is moving faster now, that opportunities are shifting, that certain doors are quietly closing while others are opening. This is for the ones who know that delay is no longer neutral. It is costly. Because when God gives an instruction, it comes with a window, and that window does not remain open forever. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest pain in life is not failure. Failure teaches, failure refines, failure can be redeemed. The greatest pain is regret, the haunting awareness that you were told what to do, you were shown the way, and you chose to hesitate. That kind of regret does not fade easily, it echoes. Tonight, you are not here to be entertained. You are here to be confronted with truth, with urgency, and with a choice. What you do with what you are about to hear will matter more than you realize, because some instructions, once ignored, are never repeated. Divine instruction is not common, and it is never casual. God does not interrupt a life without reason. When instruction comes, it is because something irreversible is approaching, either an elevation that requires preparation or a collapse that requires escape. Chosen ones must understand this clearly. God does not speak to fill silence, He speaks to alter direction. Many people pray for signs, but few are prepared for instruction. A sign can be observed, an instruction must be obeyed. And obedience is costly because it demands movement. When God gives instruction, He is not inviting discussion, He is initiating transition. That is why divine instruction carries weight in the spirit. You feel it, it presses on you. It does not leave you alone. Instruction comes when God has already measured the future. He sees what you cannot see. He sees who will change, who will betray, who will stagnate, and who will evolve. When God instructs you to move, to detach, to speak, or to remain silent, it is because staying the same would eventually destroy what He intends to build through you. Chosen ones often mistake the rarity of instruction for uncertainty, but the opposite is true. God does not overload you with commands, because too many instructions dilute obedience. When instruction arrives, it is precise, focused, direct. It usually addresses one area, the very area you have been avoiding, excusing, or overthinking. This is how you know it is divine. It disrupts your comfort but restores your alignment. Divine instruction rarely aligns with logic, timing, or popular opinion. If it did, it would not require faith. God's instruction often contradicts you, our emotions, your past investments, and your fear of loss. It asks you to leave what looks stable for what feels uncertain. But uncertainty in obedience is safer than security in disobedience. Instruction is God's way of saying, the season you are in has expired. When God instructs, He is not reacting, He is preempting. He moves you before things collapse, before relationships sour, before systems fail. Many chosen ones only realized later that what felt like a sacrifice was actually an extraction. God was pulling them out quietly before damage became public. This is why instruction feels urgent. Heaven operates on timing, not convenience. Delayed obedience is still disobedience because instruction carries grace for a specific moment. That grace does not linger indefinitely. When you move when instructed, the path opens smoothly. When you delay, resistance increases. What was meant to be light becomes heavy. Chosen ones must recognize this pattern. Confusion often increases after instru. Sion is ignored, peace fades, clarity blurs, energy drains. This is not spiritual attack, it is misalignment. Your spirit knows you are out of position. God does not chase you with instructions. He gives them once, sometimes twice, and then He waits. Silence after instruction is not abandonment, it is expectation. God is watching to see whether you trust Him enough to move without constant reassurance. Instruction tests trust more than belief. Many believe God can do anything, but few trust Him enough to obey without understanding the outcome. Faith says God is able. Obedience says God is right. Chosen ones are not chosen for privilege, they are chosen for responsibility. When instruction comes, it is because your obedience will affect more than just you. Your movement unlocks protection for others. Your obedience alters timelines beyond your own. That is why hesitation carries weight. It delays not only your breakthrough, but the breakthroughs connected to you. Divine instruction. Oh, F10 comes quietly. It does not announce itself with drama. It arrives as an inner knowing, a repeated nudge, a thought that will not release you. The quieter it is, the more serious it tends to be. Loud instructions are for crowds. Quiet instructions are for leaders. God does not explain everything because explanation creates dependence on understanding instead of trust. If He told you every consequence, every reward, every obstacle, obedience would become a transaction. God wants surrender, not negotiation. Instruction always precedes expansion. Before growth, there is movement. Before elevation, there is separation. Before increase, there is alignment. God never builds on foundations He has already instructed you to leave. Chosen ones often struggle here because instruction threatens identity. You have invested time, effort, reputation, and emotion into your current position. Obedience feels like loss because it requires releasing what you worked hard to build. But God is not dismantling your progress, He is repurposing it. Nothing surrendered in obedience is wasted. The danger is not in missing one instruction, it is in normalizing delay. Once hesitation becomes a habit, clarity fades, sensitivity dulls, discernment weakens. Over time, people stop hearing God not because He stopped speaking, but because they trained themselves to ignore Him. Regret does not come from ignorance, it comes from remembrance, from looking back and realizing the instruction was clear, timely, and accurate, and you chose comfort instead. This is why God warns chosen ones early. He protects them from future self blame. Instruction is proof of relationship. God instructs those He trusts with responsibility. If He did not care about your future, He would let you drift. Instruction is intervention. It is evidence that heaven is involved in your direction. Chosen ones must stop asking for confirmation when obedience is required. Repeated confirmation requests are often disguised fear. God will and not compete with your hesitation. When instruction is clear, movement is the confirmation. Understand this: God does not adjust instructions to fit your readiness, He issues them based on destiny timing. You grow into readiness through obedience, not before it. The strength you think you lack is released during movement, not prior to it. Instruction is serious because consequences are real, not punishment, but outcomes. Obedience accelerates, disobedience complicates. God will still be faithful, but the path becomes longer, heavier, and more painful. Chosen one, when instruction comes, it is not about proving loyalty, it is about positioning for what is next. Heaven is orderly, destiny requires alignment. Instruction is the mechanism God uses to reposition you before release. God speaks because He intends to act. Your obedience is the trigger. Ignore instruction, and life will teach you through repetition and resistance. Obey instruction. and life will open through alignment and flow. The choice determines whether your growth is accelerated or forced. Divine instruction is rare because it is powerful, and it is never casual because eternity is always involved. Ignoring divine instruction never cancels destiny, but it always complicates it. God is merciful, but mercy does not erase consequence. When a chosen one disregards instruction, the future does not disappear. It becomes heavier, slower, and more painful to reach. This is the hidden cost of delay, and it is the reason regret is often louder than failure. God's instruction is not meant to control you, it is meant to protect you. When He speaks, He is not reacting to the present, He is responding to what is coming. Disobedience, then, is not simply refusing a command, it is choosing to walk blindly into terrain God already mapped for you. What could have been avoided must now be endured. Most people think ignoring instruction looks like rebellion. In reality, it looks like hesitation. It looks like overthinking. It looks like waiting for the right time. But spiritual delay is dangerous because it feels harmless. Days turn into months, months turn into years, and suddenly you are living in a season you were supposed to pass through. Delay does not feel like disobedience until consequences appear. When instruction is ignored, destiny does not stop, it detours. God will still work, but the path becomes more complex. You encounter unnecessary resistance, repeat lessons, and face pressures that were never part of the original design. This is why many chosen ones feel exhausted without understanding why. They are working harder than obedience ever required. Disobedience multiplies effort while reducing peace. God's plan always includes provision, but provision flows through alignment. When you step out of alignment, provision becomes inconsistent. You may survive, but you struggle. You progress, but slowly. You achieve, but without rest. This is not because God withdrew His favor, it is because stepped outside the current of it. The most painful part of ignoring instruction is awareness. Deep down, you know. You know when you are forcing something God asks you to release. You know when you are staying where grace has expired. This awareness becomes a quiet torment because your spirit remembers what obedience felt like. Regret grows in the space between instruction and consequence. God warns before He allows, that is His nature. He speaks first so that when outcomes occur, you are not blindsided. Ignoring instruction does not make God harsh, it makes life honest. Reality enforces what disobedience invites. Many chosen ones misunderstand suffering that follows disobedience. They call it attack, warfare, or opposition, when in truth it is resistance caused by misalignment. When you move against divine direction, everything requires more force. Nothing flows easily. Even victories feel draining. God never intended destiny to be achieved through constant struggle. The delay created by ignoring instruction also affects timing. Some opportunities are seasonal. Some doors open briefly. God does not punish you by closing them. Time does. When you hesitate too long, the environment shifts. People move on. Systems change. Conditions evolve. What once required obedience now requires recovery. This is where regret takes root. Regret is not sorrow over loss. It is sorrow over awareness. It is knowing you were warned, knowing you had the option to move sooner, knowing the pain you are enduring was avoidable. This is why God urges obedience early. He loves you enough to confront you before life does. Ignoring instruction often leads to repetition. You find yourself in similar relationships, similar situations, similar emotional cycles, wondering why nothing changes. But change was never blocked by ability. It was blocked by obedience. Until instruction is honored, progress plateaus. God will not override your free will. He will allow you to experience the way of your choice. Not to punish you, but to teach you the value of alignment. Pain becomes the teacher when instruction is ignored. This is why many people only obey after suffering. They do what God asked years earlier, but now under pressure instead of peace. The instruction did not change, the conditions did. What once could have been done quietly now requires desperation. Delayed obedience turns instruction into crisis management. Chosen ones who ignore instruction often become spiritually numb. Sensitivity dulls because ignoring God requires silencing your inner witness. Over time, this creates distance, not because God left, but because ignoring His voice trained your spirit to tune it out. This is dangerous because clarity depends on responsiveness. When obedience weakens, discernment follows. God does not stop loving you when you disobey. He remains present, faithful, and patient. But presence does not equal approval. Favor does not mean alignment. God can be with you while still waiting on you. Destiny waits where instruction was last given. Ignoring instruction also affects others. Your obedience is connected to more than your own life. When you delay, people connected to your destiny experience delay as well. This is why obedience carries weight. It moves timelines beyond your own. Regret often includes the realization that others suffered unnecessarily because you hesitated. God's instructions are not arbitrary, they are precise responses to future outcomes. When you ignore them, you choose to learn through consequence instead of trust. And consequence is always a harsher teacher. Eventually, every chosen one faces this moment: obey now or endure later. God does not shame you for past disobedience, He invites you to return. But returning often requires undoing what delay built, repairing what obedience would have preserved, healing what alignment would have protected. This is why regret feels heavy. It includes both loss and labor. But understand this: regret is not permanent unless you remain stubborn. God restores when obedience resumes. However, restoration often takes longer than prevention would have. The instruction you ignored did not expire, it waited, and it is still waiting. Delay does not change God's will, it changes your experience of it. Obedience brings peace even when it is difficult. Disobedience brings strain even when it seems easier. God would rather lead you than correct you through pain. Instruction is His preferred method, consequence is His last resort. Chosen one, the lesson of ignoring instruction is costly, but it is clear. Destiny is not denied by disobedience, but it is delayed, and delay extracts a price. What you refuse to obey willingly, life will eventually demand forcefully. Divine instruction often contradicts logic, human reasoning, and even your own comfort. This is not an accident, and it is not a flaw in your understanding, it is intentional. God's instructions are designed to move you out of limitation, beyond the ordinary, and into alignment with your destiny. If they felt convenient, safe, or easily understandable, they would not require faith. They would not test courage. They would not demand transformation. The first reason divine instructions feel illogical is because they operate in a realm beyond natural reasoning. Your mind processes the world according to patterns, habits, and past experiences. God's instruction, however, is anchored in possibilities that the mind has not yet imagined. When He tells you to step away from a relationship, a job, a city, or even a belief, it may contradict what the world deems reasonable. To the natural eye, it may even appear reckless. But the spiritual eye sees the necessity, the alignment, and the ultimate outcome. Comfort is a trap for the chosen ones. The natural mind clings to what feels safe, but God's instructions often require you to release safety in order to receive favor. That is why divine instruct. Ion creates discomfort. It disrupts the familiar, shakes the foundation, and challenges the ego. When you follow an instruction that contradicts your feelings of comfort, you are stepping into obedience, and obedience is the gateway to destiny. Another reason divine instruction contradicts logic is that it often precedes opportunity. The instruction may tell you to leave before circumstances have improved or to act before conditions are ideal. The human mind struggles with this because it seeks timing, preparation, and certainty. God, however, operates on timing aligned with destiny, not human convenience. When He instructs, He is already accounting for what you cannot see yet. Obeying before understanding is not reckless, it is trust in the unseen. Resistance naturally arises when instruction contradicts logic. Your family, friends, and peers may question your choices. Your inner doubts will rise. The pressure will feel immense. This is normal. God does not guarantee approval from the old. He guarantees alignment with purpose. When you follow an instruction that seems unreasonable, you are separating your path from the crowd and stepping into the place of influence. Many chosen ones delay because they seek full understanding. They want clarity, proof, and confirmation. But divine instruction is often given precisely because the clarity will only come after obedience. Waiting for understanding before action is the trap of logic. It prioritizes comprehension over destiny. The instruction is given not for debate but for movement. Trust produces clarity, hesitation produces confusion. Divine instruction is also designed to refine character. When God tells you to act against comfort, it is not just about external circumstances, it is about internal transformation. Obedience in discomfort builds resilience, strength, and spiritual authority. Every instruction that contradicts your logic is a test of loyalty and faith. Will you trust the word, or will you rely on reasoning? Will you obey in spite of fear, or will you wait for proof? The human mind will attempt to rationalize delay. It will create arguments. I am not ready. I need more time. This may not work. These thoughts are not always lies. They are the natural mind protecting itself. But protection is not the same as alignment. Divine instruction requires you to move beyond protection and into trust. The instruction is given because God has already secured the path. Your job is to walk it. Contradiction is also evidence of elevation. God rarely instructs you to stay where you are, even if it feels secure. Instruction that challenges logic signals growth, opportunity, and favor. If it were easy, the transformation would be small. If it were obvious, the result would be ordinary. The greater the contradiction, the greater the elevation that awaits. Many people fail to obey because they confuse fear with wisdom. Fear speaks in the voice of logic. This is too risky. I cannot leave yet. I need M. Or preparation. Wisdom, however, often requires action that the mind cannot justify. The contradiction between fear and divine instruction is a signal, not a warning. God is calling you into faith, not comfort. Obedience to contradiction also releases unseen forces. When you act in alignment with instruction, even against logic, circumstances begin to shift. People, opportunities, finances, and relationships move in ways that defy understanding. Doors that seemed impossible open. Problems that appeared unsolvable dissolve. This is the invisible benefit of moving before the mind can comprehend. It unleashes divine acceleration. Resistance from others is part of the process. When instruction contradicts logic, not everyone will understand. Some will criticize, some will doubt, some may even oppose. But your obedience is not contingent on human approval. It is anchored in destiny. The more the world questions, the clearer it becomes that you are on the path of purpose. Divine instruction often isolates the chosen one. The voice that contradicts logic may come as a whisper in solitude. The path may feel lonely. Yet it is in that loneliness that faith is strengthened, discernment is sharpened, and obedience is refined. The contradiction separates those who are willing to trust God from those who rely solely on human understanding. The pattern is always the same. Instruction arrives, logic resists, faith obeys, destiny unfolds. Obedience transforms not only circumstances but the spiritual capacity to handle what follows. The instruction that contradicts logic is a test of readiness for greater responsibility, higher favor, and deeper authority. The moment you obey, even when it defies understanding, the universe aligns. Forces unseen begin to work in your favor. People shift naturally, obstacles dissolve, opportunities present themselves. The apparent risk becomes a calculated step into divine favor. That is why God's instructions are rarely convenient. They are intenti, only disruptive to force movement, awaken faith, and position the chosen one for impact. Chosen ones must remember that obedience does not require comprehension. Following an instruction that contradicts logic is a declaration of trust. Trust in God, trust in your destiny, trust in unseen provision. Logic may question, fear may resist, and the world may doubt. But obedience to divine instruction transcends all of these. Contradiction also exposes what is truly important. When God instructs, he often removes distractions, attachments, and false securities. What feels inconvenient is often a refinement tool. What challenges reasoning is often a purification of purpose. Obeying in contradiction is a spiritual distillation. It removes everything that cannot accompany you into the next season. The chosen one who obeys in contradiction becomes a vessel for uncommon favor. They no longer depend on circumstances, the approval of others, or the visible path. Their authority grows because it is anchored in alignment, not in convenience. The instruction that once felt illogical becomes the foundation of unstoppable momentum. Every great shift in history, every breakthrough, and every rise of destiny was preceded by instruction that contradicted logic. If it had made sense to the natural mind, it would have been ordinary. But extraordinary elevation always begins where comfort, reasoning, and familiarity end. Obedience in contradiction is the ultimate test of trust. It requires letting go of fear, ignoring skepticism, and walking forward with confidence in what is unseen. The instruction may feel impossible, inconvenient, or irrational, but in obedience, it becomes the gateway to everything that was promised. The chosen ones who understand this never wait for clarity. They move when instructed, trusting that understanding will follow. They recognize that contradiction is not a barrier, but a signal, a divine nudge, and a key to alignment. The instruction that challenges logic is the instrument through which God reshapes reality, elevates destiny, and manifests his favor. Faith obeys where reasoning resists. Comfort steps aside where obedience demands. Logic gives way to alignment. And in that space, the chosen one discovers the power, protection, and acceleration that only obedience to divine instruction can produce. Obedience to divine instruction activates forces that the natural mind cannot perceive. When a chosen one follows what God commands, unseen powers begin to move in their favor, rearranging circumstances, opening doors, and removing obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. This is not metaphorical, it is a spiritual principle. The moment you align with divine instruction, the universe itself begins to cooperate with your destiny. God's instruction carries inherent authority. It is not advice or suggestion, it is a directive. And when you obey, you are not merely following rules, you are entering into partnership with the divine order. The power T activates when you obey cannot be manufactured by effort, strategy, or intellect. It is supernatural acceleration. What seems impossible suddenly becomes inevitable. One of the first ways obedience activates protection is through removal. People, places, and situations that were positioned to hinder you begin to shift. Relationships that once seemed loyal but were subtly draining distance themselves naturally. Opportunities that were blocked appear without effort. Circumstances that threaten stagnation dissolve. This is why instruction often feels urgent. It is protective by design. God is moving you ahead of danger, and obedience ensures that his hand is between you and what could harm you. Acceleration is another immediate effect of obedience. When you obey divine instruction, time itself seems to bend in your favor. What once required months can happen in days. What once seemed blocked now flows effortlessly. This is not coincidence, it is the natural consequence of alignment. The universe is structured to respond to obedience because divine instruction sets forces in motion that are greater than the obstacles themselves. Favor manifests in ways that the mind cannot calculate. People who could have been indifferent now support you. Situations that once resisted cooperation begin to conform. Doors open not because you persuaded them, but because obedience summoned favor that had already been reserved for you. The moment you act according to God's direction, you step into a field of provision that is preordained yet inaccessible until obedience occurs. Many chosen ones underestimate the importance of immediate obedience. They delay, thinking conditions must be perfect or understanding complete. But divine instruction is not conditional on human readiness. The sooner you move, the sooner the protection, acceleration, and favor manifest. Hesitation does not cancel blessing. It simply postpones it and allows resistance to gather strength. Obedience also reposes, sheds your spiritual authority. When you follow instruction, your capacity to influence outcomes expands. You are no longer merely responding to circumstances, you are operating in alignment with destiny. This shift in authority is subtle but unmistakable. People notice it, circumstances respond to it, and opportunities converge around it. What appears as luck is often the invisible result of obedient alignment. Resistance from the world intensifies when obedience begins to manifest favor. This is natural. Human systems do not easily bend to divine order. Obstacles that once seemed insurmountable now attempt to resist your movement. Yet the more you persist in obedience, the more those forces dissolve. Obedience transforms opposition into stepping stones. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to demonstrate faith and activate even greater favor. Divine instruction also activates timing. Opportunities are not random, they are divinely orchestrated. When you obey, you position yourself in the right place at the right time. The unseen network of destiny begins to converge on you, aligning people, resources, and circumstances to support the outcome God intends. Missed obedience misaligns timing, and what could have been smooth becomes complicated. Faith is the trigger for this activation. Obedience without faith is mere compliance. Obedience with faith unlocks the unseen. When a chosen one moves in faith, unseen forces respond in ways that cannot be planned or predicted. Your human effort cannot replicate this, it is supernatural. Your obedience is the key that opens realms of favor, acceleration, and protection reserved for those who respond without delay. Obedience also strengthens resilience. When divine instruction calls you to act, you may face discomfort, doubt, or external opposition. Each step taken in alignment reinforces your spiritual stamina. The very act of trusting and moving without visible evidence trains your spirit for greater challenges. Protection, acceleration, and favor are not just about outcomes, they are about transformation. They shape the chosen one into a vessel capable of sustaining divine blessing. Another effect of obedience is clarity. When you respond to instruction, confusion diminishes. Opportunities become recognizable. Decisions become easier. Circumstances that once seemed complex simplify. This is not because the problems vanish immediately, but because obedience puts you in alignment with the flow of divine intelligence that governs outcomes. Movement brings clarity, hesitation invites doubt. Obedience also cultivates spiritual momentum. The first step activates the second, and the second step activates the third. What begins as small alignment triggers a cascade of movement, opportunities, and favor. Momentum is cumulative. Each act of obedience compounds the effect, accelerating your progress exponentially. Conversely, delay interrupts momentum, allowing resistance to regain foothold. Protection, acceleration, and favor are interdependent. Protection ensures survival, acceleration ensures progress, and favor ensures influence. Each one complements the others, but all three are activated primarily by obedience. This is why the chosen one cannot afford to wait. Delay may feel safe, but in reality it postpones divine intervention. Immediate obedience aligns your personal will with the divine will, creating a conduit for all three to flow. Obedience also clarifies relationships. People who are meant to support your journey align naturally. Those who are not intended for your path drift away. The instruction that seems difficult or inconvenient often serves as a filter, separating allies from distractions. This is part of protection and preparation. Divine instruction rarely addresses only the external, it addresses the environment, relationships, and conditions necessary for breakthrough. Finally, obedience demonstrates spiritual maturity. The chosen one is not Mesa, aid by knowledge alone, but by action. Following instruction, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient, is proof of readiness for responsibility and reward. The universe responds not to desire alone, but to aligned action. Favor, protection, and acceleration are consequences of responsiveness, not aspiration. The forces activated by obedience are precise, unseen, and irreversible. Once the chosen one moves in alignment, momentum builds, opportunities multiply, and protection manifests in ways that the natural mind cannot predict. Every delay weakens the activation, every hesitation diminishes the flow. Obedience, therefore, is not optional. It is the mechanism through which divine destiny becomes visible in your life. The chosen one must understand this principle deeply. Nothing in the natural world can replicate the activation that follows obedient movement. Human effort, planning, and strategy can accomplish much, but divine alignment brings exponential outcomes. The moment you obey instruction, you step into a field where circumstances, timing, people, and resources respond supernaturally. This is the advantage of alignment, the power of obedience, and the reason divine instruction is given in the first place. Obedience transforms potential into reality. It transforms waiting into action. It transforms challenge into opportunity. Protection, acceleration, and favor do not arrive through hesitation or indecision. They arrive through movement. The chosen one who acts is the one who activates the forces that were already waiting. The universe is structured to obey the divine, and obedience is the trigger that makes it manifest. Regret is one of the heaviest burdens a chosen one can carry, and it comes not from failure, but from awareness. There's nothing more piercing than the knowledge that God spoke, that a path was illuminated, that a window of opportunity was opened, and yet it was ignored. Regret is the echo of instruction that was refused, the memory of grace left unused, and the haunting recognition that the consequences of delay could have been avoided. Every chosen one knows the feeling, the moment when clarity arrived but hesitation ruled. You felt the nudge in your spirit. You sensed key urgency. You knew deep down what needed to be done. And yet fear, pride, or comfort caused pause. That pause becomes a weight on the soul, a memory that lingers long after circumstances have changed. The tragedy is that regret is not simply emotional. It shapes the trajectory of your future. It colors your decisions, it slows your faith, and it delays the flow of destiny. Regret also carries a lesson about timing. Divine instruction always comes at a precise moment, and that moment is tied to grace. When you obey immediately, the path is smooth, the obstacles minimal, and the unseen forces aligned. When you delay, you step outside the moment of grace. That delay does not cancel destiny, but it complicates it. Opportunities may remain, but they arrive through struggle rather than flow. Doors that once opened easily now require effort to unlock. What could have been effortless becomes laborious, and the difference is always remembered. Chosen ones often try to rationalize delay. I wasn't ready. I needed more time. I was waiting for confirmation. These thoughts may comfort the mind, but they do nothing for the spirit. The spirit remembers what was asked and when it was asked. It does not forgive hesitation. It stores awareness. Regret is the shadow of ignored instruction, growing longer the longer obedience is postponed. Regret also amplifies the cost of experience. Life often teaches through repetition. The lessons that could have been learned through obedience are instead learned through resistance. What could have been avoided through trust must now be endured through trial. Every moment of hesitation adds friction to the journey, making the path steeper, the lessons harsher, and the victories delayed. One of the most painful aspects of regret is its clarity. Unlike confusion or failure, which may disguise lessons, regret is unmistakable. You remember exactly what you were instructed to do. You remember the moment when action was possible, and now, as the consequences unfold, you recognize how simple obedience could have sparked. Red, you struggle. This clarity is both gift and curse. It teaches discernment, but it reminds you of your own hesitation. Regret is also a reflection of responsibility. Chosen ones carry weight because their choices impact more than themselves. Ignoring instruction affects relationships, opportunities, and timelines beyond personal life. Those connected to your journey experience delay, obstacles, and misalignment when you hesitate. The awareness that others suffer because of your indecision deepens regret and underscores the importance of obedience. Spiritual maturity is measured in response to instruction. Knowledge alone does not protect from regret. Awareness of the path is insufficient. Action is required. The chosen one who moves immediately demonstrates readiness, trust, and alignment. The one who hesitates stores regret. That regret may serve as a teacher, but it is a painful one, and its lessons come at the cost of lost time, missed opportunity, and unnecessary struggle. Regret. Cumulative. The more instructions ignored, the heavier the burden. It is not immediate punishment, but the gradual accumulation of misalignment. Every delay creates a new layer of friction. Every hesitation strengthens resistance. Every refusal to act adds to the memory of what could have been. Over time, regret becomes a weight that influences every choice, every decision, and every movement forward. Yet regret is not irreversible. Recognition, realignment, and immediate obedience can shift the course. The chosen one who acknowledges hesitation, returns to alignment, and obeys without delay activates grace once more. The lessons of regret transform into wisdom, discernment, and spiritual authority. The difference is that the pain of delay cannot be erased. It can only be redeemed through renewed obedience and faithfulness. One of the reasons regret is so heavy is that it forces you to confront your own free will. God does not coerce, He instructs. The moment you act, you participate. 8 in divine movement. The moment you hesitate, you exercise your own will against instruction. Regret is the reminder that free will carries responsibility. Every choice matters and every hesitation has consequences. Regret also exposes fear, pride, and attachment. Fear of loss, attachment to comfort, or pride in understanding often prevents immediate obedience. These internal barriers magnify the weight of regret because the instruction was not simply external. It was an internal call to trust. When the chosen one delays, it is often not the instruction itself that is difficult, but the surrender required to obey. Regret is the echo of unmastered fear and unresolved attachment. Another aspect of regret is its role as a catalyst for transformation. While painful, it sharpens discernment, strengthens resolve, and heightens sensitivity to future instruction. The chosen one who has experienced the consequences of hesitation becomes more attuned, more responsive, and more aligned in the future. In this sense, regret is a teacher, but a teacher who prefers prevention over correction. Regret is not random, it is always tied to awareness. You cannot regret what you did not know. The heaviest regret is reserved for the moments when clarity existed, instruction was given, and the choice was yours to act upon. This is why the weight of disobedience is always heaviest for the aware, the sensitive, and the chosen, those who are most capable of hearing and understanding God's voice. The danger of regret is that it often lingers silently. Unlike failure, which is visible and can be corrected publicly, regret is internal. It whispers in moments of solitude. It revisits in times of reflection. It questions decisions long after circumstances have passed. Its impact is spiritual, emotional, and mental, shaping the chosen one's approach to life, faith, and obedience. Regret also highlights the preciousness of timing. Divine instruction is always seasonal. The window opens, grace flows, and opportunity appears. Hesitation may close the window. The instruction itself may not expire, but the conditions that made it favorable do. Timing is a spiritual currency, and regret is the awareness that you spent it poorly. Every chosen one faces this reality. Obedience protects, accelerates, and releases favor. Hesitation invites struggle, delay, and regret. The difference between the two is always clear in hindsight. Those who obey in faith never forget the power of alignment. Those who delay always carry the memory of what obedience could have spared. Regret ultimately is a spiritual alarm. It signals where obedience was absent, where faith faltered, and where trust was insufficient. It is not meant to destroy but to teach. It is not punishment but consequence. And it is the reminder that divine instruction is never casual, delay is never harmless, and hesitation is always costly. The heaviest regret is not about loss, it is about awareness. You knew, you were instructed, you had the opportunity. And the memory of that awareness lingers, a silent companion reminding you that life moves quickly, that grace is fleeting, and that obedience is the currency of destiny. Regret becomes permanent only if the chosen one refuses to realign. Immediate obedience, renewed faith, and surrender restore connection with divine favor. The pain remains, but it transforms into wisdom, discernment, and spiritual authority. The weight of what was ignored becomes the foundation for what will never be ignored again. The chosen one who understands regret never waits for repeated signs. They do not debate, overthink, or negotiate. They move when instructed. They obey without delay. They act in alignment with the clarity they receive. In this way, regret is not repeated. It becomes a teacher, not a jailer, and the future is reshaped by lessons already learned.